Hello, and welcome to this presentation, What's Missing from the Science of Reading. I'm Karen Taylor of the Color Vowel Approach, and this is my colleague, Laura McIndoo. I'll be presenting without her today, but this is a representation of an earlier version of this topic that we delivered at the TESOL convention in 2025 in Long Beach. It's a bit more developed, so if you attended our Long Beach presentation, this is a little more nuanced. We only had 45 minutes at that time, but this one I've broken up into smaller bits and a little easier to digest and a little bit more comprehensive. So welcome. I'd like to start just by saying that I come from the world of English as a second language, as does Laura. And for years, decades now, I've been watching the world of reading. And I do think there are two distinct worlds. And I've tried to, become part of the reading world to some extent. I've attended some dyslexia conferences and other reading events. And what I find is that there's a different language to it, very different history to it. And I've often found myself sort of standing to the side and thinking maybe they have a lot going on, and I'll just stick with English as a second language. But it's come to a point where we really feel we can't remain silent with the strategies that we have that are powerful for English language learners and just learners alike, all ages, all levels. This is what we've found over the last 25 years of developing the color vowel approach, the color vowel chart, which you'll see shortly, and the strategies that we've taught teachers to use. We think we have something powerful to lend the world of reading and to solve a problem that reading instruction faces constantly, and that is that readers continue to struggle with written English, decoding it, making sense of it, engaging with it. So without further ado, let's get started with this presentation. We're going to start by just looking at what the science of reading, that term, means. I'm conflicted, throughout this presentation, you'll see it capitalized as it is here. It's capitalized. And so that science of reading really evokes this idea that it is a thing, that there's a person at the head of it, that it has a communication channel. And in fact, it doesn't. I mean, it's something much broader than a single thing. And yet there's not a lot of clarity around that. An article that I recently found was this one, touting what it's not. It just starts off with a barrage of, you don't know what the science of reading is. It's not phonics. It's not curriculum. It's not materials. It's not comprehension. It's not word recognition. And it leaves the reader, especially readers who don't have a great deal of time, readers who need to make sense of the science of reading, meaning teachers and parents, and they want to know what it means so they can go and do it. And so articles like this add to a great deal of confusion around the topic. And I would say, as far as this particular piece goes, it's this, and yet it's more than this, right? It's not just phonics. It's not exactly curriculum. It's the research behind what should be in curriculum that does include phonics. So we have to be careful about what we're really saying. And in fact, in our own title, What's Missing from the Science of Reading, you'll also see in this presentation that I start including what's missing from the implementation of the science of reading, because the science of reading is really just an interdisciplinary consensus of thought around what effective literacy instruction should look like. And I shouldn't say just, it is an evolving, ever evolving interdisciplinary consensus. It's the research out there. It's the work being done with MRI scans. It's the work being done right there in classrooms and in tutoring sessions and action research, a combination of robust studies that have come together in a school of thought. So these are real people working really hard to find answers to how it is that we learn to read, especially English, because it is such an interesting language when it comes to comparing how it sounds and what it looks like. Okay, so it is not a thing. It is a school of growing, evolving thought around instruction. Okay. It's also, therefore, not well understood. We really like to have things in our hands, or say a directive to go do this particular thing. And so, in the wake of that not being well understood, there's sort of a vacuum of thinginess that we want, and because of that, for many, science of reading is just the latest round of political pressure. You have a lot of mandates coming forth. In fact, we'll look at some of those in a moment. And with that, by the way, there's a huge publishing frenzy around it. A lot of projects or packages that'll say, science of reading compliant, or reflects the science of reading, or built on the science of reading. And actually, a lot of those packages, those programs, have not changed significantly since the last time they were published. They just look new on the outside. And so I've seen this, and I've heard teachers speak of this, and it's something to be aware of, that it's now a catchphrase. We run the risk of devaluing and dismissing all of the incredible work that's being put into the body of research that we call the science of reading. Okay. But today, and during this workshop and this series of meetings that we'll have with teachers, one thing that I would say is missing in the practice, in the implementation of the science of reading, and you'll forgive me, I hope, for keeping the title simple. What's missing from the science of reading is multilingual learners. And we're coming from this world of English as a second language, English as a foreign language, all of the years of experience, insight, research that we've done, the materials and the procedures we've developed that work. And so we are here in good faith to offer these to teachers who work with struggling readers, who teach literacy. And you'll hear maybe in this workshop, you'll hear me be reaching out to teachers of young learners, but I know that we'll have a lot watching this who are teachers of adults. And I think if you'll let me focus in on the young learners and just apply that, you can fill in the phrase or replace it with the adults. You know that you will get to know that I've done a great deal of work with adults. And so I'm going to speak to young learners during this workshop. All right. I spoke earlier of mandates that, without a great deal of understanding, many states have actually run to provide guidance through mandates. Right now, 80% of United States states have science of reading mandates. So 40 of our states say, teachers, school districts, you must use the science of reading, as if they weren't already. And there is a reaction going on here. There was kind of a big to-do that came around in about 2020 around some discoveries about the previous sets of strategies. And I won't go into that right now, but if you are familiar with the podcast Sold a Story, you'll know that this has been a huge dialogue around previous reading recovery strategies and 3Qing, and that this was found to be very ineffective, and yet people were very invested in it. And so now the science of reading has been brought back as sort of come to your senses and do the right thing. And I think it's a disservice to the many teachers and parents, homeschoolers, who have been reading all the research all along and continue to. Okay. And yet, again, we need to know, why is it we struggle so much with reading instruction? Okay. So 40 of our 50 states have science of reading mandates. Only 32 of them, 32 of them have no specific directives regarding multilingual learners or English learners. And 1 in 3 of those have nothing to say at all about multilingual learners, meaning it's basically implicit that if you're an English learner, you simply have to try harder. Maybe you need more time, but that what's out there instructionally is enough for you. It is what you need. And I disagree with that. In fact, I think a lot is missing, and it's also affecting vulnerable readers who are not second language learners of English. Okay. So where does this leave English learners? I'd like to just put us in a classroom for a minute and get very practical. Here is a classroom. What do you see in this classroom? If you're a second grader, first grader, what do you see? And what does it say to you, right? There's a lot happening in this classroom. If I look along the top, I can see a string of images, and I'll tell you that they start with apple, bat, cat, dog, and then something I haven't been able to figure out that I think represents a word that starts with the letter E. So this is an alphabet pictorial kind of strip up at the top. We then have a number line. We then also have what you might know as kid lips, or just lip positions that are showing these are consonant sounds that are written, these letters, okay? And all of those, if you kind of look at this with fresh eyes, all of these lips look different. Some of them look like they're doing pretty similar things, but I could get just stuck on looking at the different lips, and that they're all different. They're all different kids. I don't know really what I'm looking at, in other words, if I'm a first time learner in this room. There is evidence of a couple of different reading programs in here. You might recognize right here, this is Wilson Foundations. There may be something else you recognize here, phonics poster, long and short vowels. Over here on the other side, you've got some maps, and then down below you have more letters with these little sort of illustrations. And down here are even more words. These are a lot of, they might be sight words, so-called sight words. So there's a lot happening here. And when I poll kids with this picture, I say, what does this say to you about reading? What does this say to you about writing? And the response is, this tells me that this is going to be really hard. This is going to be overwhelming. And I would actually go a step further and say, I think this classroom says, I am going to bury you in so much information, you won't know what to do next. And I think that is what's happening. There's an overwhelm here. In the Color Vowel Approach, we call this a high cognitive load, a high visual load for sure. And as you look around and try to make sense of it, the high cognitive load just overwhelms. And we all know what that feels like when we have simply too much information, and maybe too much unuseful information, okay? There's one more thing happening in this picture, and it's the teacher. She is clearly using some kind of method that she has been trained in, and that is where we're headed now. The rest of this presentation and its components will revolve around an experience that my colleague Laura had last summer. Again, remember, science of reading is here. It's being thrown about in pretty forceful ways, saying, we need to get back to the science of reading. And so a lot of school systems and a lot of states have these mandates, and they are driving training, mandated training, highly incentivized training. And so in this case, my colleague Laura was provided an incentivized opportunity, meaning you're going to get paid for your time to be trained. And in her case, she was offered a training in letters. Letters is a reading training program. It starts with teachers and, of course, then flows through to learners. This is a training that is over 100 hours, can be upwards of 140 hours at the first level, if you include the practicum. Laura participated in the base training that doesn't involve the practicum that adds on. So this was an asynchronous program with some live components, I believe, where she walked through these on-demand video tutorials. And so she worked for over 100 hours. That's a lot of time, by the way, right? If you think of a 40-hour work week and you do that for 2.5 weeks, you're getting there. And we all know we don't have 2.5 full-time weeks to focus on one thing. So imagine. And so a lot of teachers have gone through this training. And this is not to vilify letters, what's coming, but it's to say that letters is representative of many reading training programs out there, and that there are gaps. And so we're simply going to speak from Laura's experience. Letters represents many good qualities, good content, but what we found is precisely these gaps that English learners are vulnerable to, and that vulnerable readers also can fall into these gaps. Okay. All right. And so I'm going to move into these gaps. What's missing? Accurate terminology and effective strategies for teaching. So-called, and I'm going to say so-called because we're actually going to shift what these mean over time, but so-called heart words, you might know these as sight words or tricky words, but these days, heart words are all the rage. Okay, so we're going to find another way to approach heart words. Better terminology and strategies for teaching stress. Okay, word families and long and short vowels, so-called long and short vowels. What's long about long vowels? What's short about short vowels? We'll talk about that. Okay. So that's where we're heading. You're going to watch, I hope, the next module will get into heart words and see what we can do to make them simpler, to use less time, frankly. I think so much time right now is absorbed by phonics programs that require more and more and more time. And we're aiming to actually bring that down, not just a bit, but significantly. We can do this. We have this to offer you. So I look forward to seeing you again in a moment. Thank you.